The morning light streamed through the blinds of the campaign headquarters as Karoline Leavitt arrived for what would become the most important day of her political career. At just 28 years old, she was already known as a rising star in political communication. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages from reporters seeking comments and team members waiting for direction. Karoline placed her coffee on the desk and took a deep breath. The polls had shifted overnight. For the first time in months, they showed a clear path to victory for the Republican candidate. The campaign needed someone to seize this moment, to craft a message that would maintain this momentum all the way to Election Day. "You saw the numbers?" asked Mike, the campaign manager, leaning against her office doorway. His eyes showed both excitement and caution. "I did," Karoline nodded, opening her laptop. "We're up by 3 points in Pennsylvania, and the trends in Michigan and Wisconsin look promising." Mike stepped into the office and closed the door behind him. "The boss wants to make a move. He thinks it's time to directly challenge Newsom's record." Gavin Newsom, the charismatic governor of California, had emerged as one of the most visible Democratic surrogates in this election cycle. His polished appearances on news shows and viral social media clips made him a formidable messenger for the Democratic Party. He had been traveling to swing states for weeks, painting a dire picture of what another Republican presidency would mean for America. "Newsom's vulnerable," Karoline said, pulling up a folder of research her team had compiled. "His state has real problems that don't match his rhetoric. Cost of living, business exodus, crime rates in major cities. The data tells a different story than the one he's selling." Mike nodded slowly. "That's exactly why the boss wants you to lead this effort. We need someone who can communicate complex policy differences in ways that connect with everyday Americans." Karoline felt a flutter of both excitement and nervousness. This would put her directly in the national spotlight, challenging one of the Democrats' most effective communicators. "When does he want to start?" she asked. "Today," Mike replied. "There's a strategy meeting in 30 minutes. The boss will be calling in." After Mike left, Karoline quickly began organizing her thoughts. She had been preparing for an opportunity like this since she first entered politics. Growing up in a small New Hampshire town, she had learned the value of straightforward talk. People appreciated honesty and clarity, especially when it came to issues affecting their daily lives. The campaign war room was buzzing when she arrived. Staffers huddled around monitors displaying the latest polling data and news coverage. On the main screen was a video of Newsom speaking to a crowd in Michigan yesterday, warning about the dangers of Republican economic policies. "He's good," muttered one of the senior advisors, "connects well with suburban voters." "But he's defending the indefensible," Karoline replied, taking her seat at the table. "His own state is the perfect case study in what happens when you prioritize ideology over practical solutions." The large screen switched to a video call, and the Republican candidate appeared. Despite being in the middle of a grueling campaign schedule, he looked energized and focused. "Good morning, team," he greeted them. "I think we all see the opportunity here. The momentum is shifting our way, but we need to accelerate it. Karoline, Mike tells me you have some ideas about how to counter Newsom's narrative." Karoline straightened in her chair. This was her moment. "Yes, sir. Governor Newsom has been effective at painting our economic vision as a threat to middle-class Americans. But the reality is that his own state provides all the evidence we need to show the flaws in Democratic policies." She pulled up a presentation on her tablet that automatically appeared on everyone's screens. "These are the numbers that tell the real story. California has the highest poverty rate in the nation when accounting for cost of living. Over 150,000 people are homeless, despite the state spending billions on the problem, and more than 300,000 residents left the state last year alone." The candidate nodded along as she continued. "My strategy is simple but powerful. We contrast promises with results. For every claim Newsom makes about what Democratic policies can deliver, we show what those same policies have actually produced in California." The room grew quiet as everyone considered her approach. "It's not about personal attacks," Karoline continued. "It's about accountability. It's about asking voters a simple question. If these policies haven't worked in California, Why would they work for America? The candidate smiled. I like it. It's substantive, fact-based, and connects directly to the concerns of everyday Americans. How quickly can you put together a comprehensive rollout? We can start today, Karoline replied confidently. I have a team ready to go with research already compiled. We can have digital ads running by tonight, talking points distributed to our surrogates by this afternoon, and I can brief you for your CNN interview tomorrow. Do it, the candidate said. And Karoline, I want you to be the face of this effort. You communicate these ideas clearly, and your youth and energy will be a stark contrast to the old guard defending failed policies. After the call ended, the room erupted with activity. Karoline's phone immediately began ringing with calls from team members eager to get started on this new direction. Later that afternoon, Karoline sat in the makeup chair preparing for her first major network interview as the campaign's new senior spokesperson. The producer had told her that Governor Newsom had criticized their candidate's economic plan just hours earlier on the same network. Nervous? Asked Lisa, her deputy, handing her a final briefing document to review. Focused, Karoline replied, scanning the latest unemployment figures from California. This isn't personal. It's about making sure voters have the full picture before they decide. As the makeup artist finished, Karoline received a text message from an unknown number. She opened it to find a simple message. Saw you're up next, looking forward to the debate. GN Gavin Newsom himself was watching. The realization sent a small shiver down her spine, but it only strengthened her resolve. This was politics at the highest level, and she was now playing a central role. The floor director approached. Ms. Leavitt, we're ready for you. 2 minutes, until you're live. Karoline stood and straightened her blazer. The path ahead would be challenging. Newsom was a skilled communicator with years of experience and the backing of Hollywood and the media establishment. But she had something powerful on her side. Data that contradicted his carefully crafted narrative. As she walked toward the set, she reminded herself of her small-town roots and the Americans she was fighting for. People who couldn't afford to wait for ideological experiments to maybe someday work. They needed practical solutions now. 30 seconds, called the director. The red light on the camera blinked on. Millions of Americans would be watching. The latest polls showed their candidate gaining ground, but the race remained tight. What happened in the next few weeks would determine the future direction of the country. Karoline took a deep breath and smiled as the anchor began the introduction. Joining us now is Karoline Leavitt, who was just named the new Senior Strategy Director for the Republican presidential campaign. Ms. Leavitt, earlier today Governor Newsom called your candidate's economic plan a disaster waiting to happen. How do you respond? The moment had arrived. With confidence built from thorough preparation, Karoline leaned forward and delivered the opening salvo in what would become one of the most consequential messaging battles of the campaign. Thank you for having me. With all due respect to Governor Newsom, Americans deserve to know the difference between promises and results. Let me show you what his policies have actually delivered in California, and then let voters decide which vision they trust for America's future. The interview was only the beginning. In the days that followed, Karoline's strategic messaging would dramatically shift the national conversation, delivering an unexpected blow to Newsom's effectiveness as a surrogate and helping build the wave of momentum that was starting to carry their candidate toward victory. The morning after her television debut, Karoline arrived at campaign headquarters to find the atmosphere completely changed. Staff members looked up from their desks as she walked through the office, some offering congratulations, others simply nodding with newfound respect. Her phone had not stopped buzzing with notifications since last night. You're trending, said Lisa, handing Karoline a tablet showing social media statistics. Your interview clip has over 2 million views already. People are calling it the California reality check. Karoline scrolled through the comments and reactions. Her strategy of contrasting Newsom's promises with California's actual results had struck a chord with viewers. Even some political analysts who typically leaned left admitted she had made compelling points about the state's housing crisis and business exodus. What's Newsom saying? Karoline asked, setting down the tablet. He's scheduled a press conference for this afternoon in Philadelphia. Lisa replied. Word is he's planning to hit back hard. Karoline nodded. Good, that means we've got him playing defense. Mike appeared in the doorway, coffee in hand and a rare smile on his face. The boss wants to see you. He's in the strategy room. When Karoline entered the strategy room, the candidate was studying a large map of electoral projections on the wall. There you are, he said, turning to greet her. That was exactly what we needed. Clear, factual, and it put Newsom in a corner having to defend his record instead of attacking ours. Thank you, sir, but this is just the beginning, Karoline replied. Newsom is smart, he'll adjust his message. Which is why we need to stay one step ahead, the candidate said, gesturing for her to join him at the conference table where several folders were spread out. I want to expand your role, not just countering Newsom but developing our broader economic message. Karoline felt a surge of excitement. This was an opportunity to shape the entire campaign narrative. I've been thinking about that, she said, opening her laptop. Our strongest contrast isn't just with Newsom's California, it's with the practical results in states where our policies have been implemented. She pulled up a presentation comparing economic indicators across different states. Look at these numbers on job creation, affordable housing development, and middle-class income growth in states with low tax rates and reduced regulations. The contrast is striking. The candidate studied the charts, nodding slowly. This tells a powerful story, but we need to make it personal. Real people, real consequences. Already on it, Karoline said. My team is interviewing families who moved from California to Texas, Arizona, and Florida. Their stories about finding affordable housing and better job opportunities are compelling. As they continued discussing strategy, Karoline's phone buzzed with a news alert. She glanced down to see Newsom had unexpectedly moved up his press conference and was speaking live from Philadelphia right now. Someone quickly turned on the large screen in the room. Newsom stood at a podium, looking confident and polished as always. What we heard last night was a fundamental misrepresentation of California's economy, he was saying. California remains the fifth largest economy in the world, a global leader in innovation, and home to more Fortune 500 companies than any other state. The candidate watched intently. He's good, he admitted. Makes everything sound positive. Karoline listened carefully as Newsom continued his defense, taking notes on her tablet. When he finished answering questions from reporters, she turned to the candidate. Notice what he didn't address? Housing costs, homelessness, the middle class leaving the state. He focused entirely on big business success and innovation, not on how everyday people are struggling. The candidate nodded. So what's our next move? We pivot to the stories of real Americans, Karoline said decisively. Data matters, but people connect with people. Tomorrow, I want to hold a roundtable with former California residents who can speak directly about why they left. Within 24 hours, Karoline had organized a media event in Phoenix featuring 5 families who had recently moved from California. Each had a powerful story to tell. We love California, said Maria Rodriguez, a nurse and mother of 3. But our rent took almost 70% of our income. Here in Arizona, we bought our first home, and my husband could finally start his small business because the regulations and fees are manageable. Reporters scribbled notes as each family shared similar experiences. Karoline had carefully selected people from different backgrounds and political views to show this wasn't a partisan issue, but a practical one. As the event was wrapping up, a reporter raised her hand. Ms. Leavitt, Governor Newsom just tweeted that these stories are cherry-picked exceptions and don't reflect California's overall success. Your response? Karoline stepped to the microphone. I invite Governor Newsom to explain to these families how their struggles are just exceptions. These aren't isolated cases. Last year, California lost a congressional seat for the first time in its history because so many people left. The numbers don't lie, even when politicians try to spin them. The answer generated immediate headlines. By evening, cable news shows were debating the exodus from high-tax states and what it meant for American families. Back at campaign headquarters that night, Karoline met with her expanding team. What had started as a focused effort to counter Newsom had grown into a central campaign theme. We've got 4 key swing states where former California residents make up significant voting blocks, explained Tony, their data analyst. In Nevada, Arizona, Texas, and Colorado, there are enough California transplants to potentially swing close races. Karoline saw the opportunity immediately. Let's organize events in each state. These voters know firsthand the consequences of the policies Newsom is promoting nationally. As her team dispersed to start working on the new initiative, Karoline noticed a message from an unknown number on her phone. It was from Newsom again. Clever move with the families. This is getting interesting. Still confident our vision will prevail. Gian. She smiled slightly at his persistence. This wasn't personal for her, it was about policies and their real-world impacts. But she understood the high stakes of this messaging battle. Whoever won the narrative war could very well determine the election outcome. Later that evening, as she was preparing to finally head home, Mike stopped by her office. The latest polling just came in, he said, his voice unusually excited. We're up 5 points in Arizona and 3 in Nevada. The messaging is working. Karoline nodded, satisfied but not surprised. People respond to truth when it's presented clearly, and we're just getting started. As she drove home under the night sky, Karoline mentally outlined the next phase of their strategy. Newsom had resources, media connections, and years of political experience on his side. But she had something powerful too. A message that resonated with ordinary Americans who felt forgotten by coastal elites. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Newsom would adjust his approach. The media would scrutinize her claims, and the opposition would attack her personally as her profile rose. But for now, the momentum was building in their favor, and the path to victory was becoming clearer each day. What had begun as a targeted response to one Democratic surrogate had evolved into something much bigger, a fundamental contrast between 2 visions for America's future. And Karoline Leavitt was just getting warmed up. 3 weeks had passed since Karoline's strategy began, and the political landscape had shifted dramatically. What started as a targeted response to Governor Newsom had evolved into a nationwide conversation about which policies truly helped everyday Americans. The campaign office now had an entire wall dedicated to tracking their progress in swing states, with red arrows pointing upward in nearly every key battleground. Michigan just flipped, announced Tony, updating the large tracking board as the morning team gathered for their daily meeting. We're up by 2 points, first time since the campaign started. A cheer went through the room. Michigan had been considered safely blue just a month ago. Karoline entered, carrying her ever-present tablet and a large coffee. The past weeks had been exhausting but exhilarating. She had appeared on 17 television shows, given 23 radio interviews, and participated in 4 major public events. Her face had become familiar to millions of Americans, and her clear, straightforward style of communication was resonating. Good morning, everyone, she said, taking her place at the head of the conference table. Let's not get too excited about one poll. We've got 32 days until Election Day, and the other side is about to throw everything they have at us. As, if on cue, Lisa hurried in with breaking news. They just announced it. The Democratic candidate is doing a major rally in Detroit next week, and they're bringing in Newsom to introduce her. The room fell silent. Everyone understood the significance. After weeks of being on the defensive, Newsom was stepping back into the spotlight in a critical swing state. They're trying to stop the bleeding in Michigan, Mike said, studying the map. Their internal polls must be showing the same shift we're seeing. Karoline took a moment to think. This was a crucial juncture. How they responded to this challenge could determine whether their momentum continued or stalled. Here's what we're going to do, she said finally. First, we need to be there. Not at their rally, but nearby. We'll organize our own event the day before with Michigan families and business owners who can speak to how our policies would help them. She walked to the whiteboard and began writing as she spoke. Second, we need to get ahead of their message. Let's produce a series of short videos showing the contrast between what Democratic policies promised and what they delivered in cities they've run for decades. Detroit is the perfect example. The team nodded, energized by her clear direction. Third, Karoline continued, I want to roll out our economic opportunity plan for the Midwest. We've been holding it for next month, but now is the time to show voters our positive vision, not just our criticism of their approach. For the next hour, they hammered out the details of what would become their biggest media push yet. By noon, team members were already booking locations in Detroit, contacting local business owners and drafting the new policy rollout. As the meeting ended, the candidate himself called in. "I hear Newsom is making his move," he said when Karoline picked up the phone. "Yes, sir, but we're ready for him." "Good. I'm adjusting my schedule. I want to be in Michigan, too. This is the moment to show strength." 3 days later, Karoline stood in the back of a manufacturing facility outside Detroit, watching as workers and their families filled the space. The campaign had transformed the factory floor into a town hall setting, with the candidates seated among everyday Michigan residents rather than standing above them on a stage. "Perfect optics," whispered Lisa, who had coordinated the visual elements. "Regular people talking about real issues, not politicians making speeches." Karoline nodded in agreement. And the contrast with tomorrow's rally couldn't be clearer. They'll have celebrities and politicians. We have the people actually affected by these policies. The event began with the factory owner, a woman named Sarah Jensen, introducing herself and explaining how regulations and energy costs had nearly forced her to close the business her grandfather had started. 3 years ago, I was ready to give up, she told the audience as cameras from every major network recorded. Then I changed my approach. I started looking at states with different policies on manufacturing and energy. We opened a second location in Indiana, and the difference was immediate. Lower costs, fewer regulatory hurdles, and more support for small manufacturers. The candidate listened intently, asking questions that allowed Sarah and other business owners to share their experiences. When it was his turn to speak, he kept his remarks brief and focused on specific policies that would help revive American manufacturing. From her position at the back, Karoline watched the faces in the crowd. She could see the connection happening, people nodding, leaning forward, engaged in a way that rarely happened at political events. The media coverage that evening was exactly what they had hoped for. A substantive discussion about economic challenges facing the Midwest, one network called it. A stark contrast to the typical campaign rally, said another. But the real test would come tomorrow, when Newsom took the stage in downtown Detroit. Karoline watched the Democratic rally from the campaign war room they had set up in their hotel. Newsom was in top form, energetic and forceful, as he introduced the Democratic candidate to a cheering crowd. "Don't be fooled by their sudden concern for working families," Newsom told the audience, directly addressing the Republican campaign's recent messaging. Where was this concern when they were cutting taxes for billionaires? Where was this concern when they were trying to take away health care from millions of Americans? He was good, passionate, articulate, and connecting with the crowd. But Karoline noticed something important. He was spending all his time attacking, rather than promoting, positive policies. "He's not addressing the core issues we've raised," she said to the team watching with her. "Nothing about the exodus from high-tax states. Nothing about housing affordability or the regulatory burden on small businesses." The rally ended with music and cheers, but the next day's headlines were split. While many covered the enthusiasm of the crowd, others noted the lack of specific plans to address the economic concerns that were top of mind for Michigan voters. That afternoon, Karoline received an unexpected invitation. A major cable network wanted to host a direct debate between her and Governor Newsom on economic policy. Prime time, 1 hour, no restrictions. "It's a trap," warned Mike when she told the team. "Newsom has years of debate experience, and they'll have home field advantage on that network." "Maybe," Karoline said, considering the offer, "but it's also an opportunity to bring our message directly to millions of viewers, without filters or editing." She thought about the families she had met in Michigan, Arizona, and Nevada, who had shared their stories of struggling under policies similar to what Newsom promoted. She thought about the small business owners who just wanted a chance to succeed without excessive burdens. "I'm doing it," she decided. "But on one condition, we bring real data and have the ability to display it on screen." No talking points without facts to back them up. The network agreed, and the debate was scheduled for 3 days later. As Karoline prepared, diving deep into economic statistics and practicing with the team, she received another text from Newsom. "Looking forward to our conversation. May the best vision for America win. GN." She smiled as she read it. Despite being political opponents, she respected his willingness to engage directly. This wasn't personal. It was about which ideas would better serve the American people. The night before the debate, as she reviewed her notes one final time, the latest national poll was released. For the first time in the campaign, the Republican candidate had taken a narrow lead. The momentum was real. But everything could change tomorrow night, when she faced off against one of the Democratic Party's most skilled communicators, with millions of Americans watching. Karoline closed her folder of preparation materials and took a deep breath. The stakes couldn't be higher, but she was ready. The truth was on her side, and she knew exactly how to share it. The television studio buzzed with activity as technicians made final adjustments to lighting and sound. In less than 30 minutes, millions of Americans would tune in to watch Karoline Leavitt face off against Governor Gavin Newsom in what many political analysts were calling the debate that could decide the election. Karoline sat quietly in the green room, reviewing her notes one last time. Unlike many political operatives who relied on memorized talking points, she had filled her notebook with real data, statistics on housing costs, migration patterns, small business closures, and economic growth across different states. Lisa entered the room with a tablet showing the latest social media activity. "It's trending already. Leavitt vs. Newsom is the top hashtag nationwide." "How's the sentiment split?" Karoline asked, not looking up from her notes. "About even. His supporters think he'll overwhelm you with experience. Our side believes your authenticity will connect better with viewers." Mike knocked on the door. "5 minutes," he said, looking unusually nervous. "The candidate just called. He's watching from Pittsburgh with the team." Karoline closed her notebook and stood up. "Time to let the facts speak for themselves." She walked toward the studio. She passed the open door to Newsom's preparation room. Their eyes met briefly. He gave her a respectful nod, which she returned. Despite being opponents, there was a professional understanding between them. Both believed in their visions for America, and both recognized the stakes of this moment. The moderator, a veteran journalist known for tough questioning, greeted them on set. "Remember the rules," she said as microphones were clipped to their lapels. 90 seconds for answers, 30 seconds for rebuttals. I'll enforce the time strictly." The red light on the camera illuminated, and the debate began. "Governor Newsom, Ms. Leavitt, welcome," the moderator began. "Tonight's focus is economic policy and its impact on American families. Governor, you'll go first. Why should Americans embrace the economic approach you're advocating when many are concerned about inflation and cost of living?" Newsom leaned forward, confident and polished. "Americans should look at results, not rhetoric. Under Democratic leadership, we've seen record job creation, historic investments in infrastructure, and support for working families through expanded child tax credits and healthcare access. What our opponents offer is the same trickle-down approach that has failed Americans time and again," he continued smoothly, citing national economic statistics and drawing on his experience governing California. When he finished, the camera turned to Karoline. "Ms. Leavitt, your response?" "I agree with the governor on one thing. Americans should absolutely look at results," Karoline began. "So let's do exactly that." She pressed a button, and the screen behind her displayed a chart showing population movements between states over the past 5 years. These are the facts. Since 2020, over 700,000 Americans have left California. They're moving to states with different economic approaches: Texas, Florida, Arizona, Tennessee. When people vote with their feet, we should pay attention. She clicked to another slide showing housing costs across major cities. The median home price in California is more than double the national average. Nearly half of residents can't afford to live where they work. This isn't just happening in California. It's happening in every state and city that has adopted similar policies. Karoline's direct, data-driven approach created a stark contrast with Newsom's more traditional political rhetoric. As the debate continued through topics like small business regulations, energy policy, and inflation, she consistently brought the conversation back to how policies affected everyday Americans. Governor Newsom talks about California's massive economy, which is impressive, she said during one exchange. But an economy that only works for the very wealthy and the very poor, while squeezing out the middle class, isn't a model for America. When a family making $100,000 a year qualifies for low-income housing in San Francisco, something is fundamentally broken. Newsom pushed back forcefully. Ms. Leavitt conveniently ignores California's leadership in innovation, technology, and climate initiatives. Our economy isn't just large, it's forward-looking. We're creating the jobs of tomorrow while her candidate wants to bring back industries of yesterday. The debate reached its most intense moment when the moderator asked about the cost of living. Ms. Leavitt, you frequently cite the exodus from California as evidence of policy failure, but isn't it simply a matter of California being a victim of its own success? People leave because it's desirable, which drives up costs. That's a convenient explanation, Karoline replied, but it doesn't match reality. Phoenix and Nashville are also desirable cities with growing populations, yet they remain far more affordable than Los Angeles or San Francisco. The difference isn't desirability, it's policy choices about housing development, regulation, and taxation. She clicked to her final slide, a comparison of regulatory burdens across states. In California, building a simple apartment building requires an average of 5 years for approval and costs millions in permits and studies before a single shovel hits the ground. In Texas, that same building takes 18 months. These are choices, not inevitable outcomes of success. When the 90-minute debate concluded, both participants had made strong cases for their visions. Newsom's experience and polished delivery contrasted with Karoline's data-focused, straightforward approach. As they shook hands at the end, Newsom leaned in. "Well done," he said quietly. "You made me work for it." "Likewise, Governor," she replied. "That's how democracy should work." Back in the green room, the campaign team was ecstatic. The first poll numbers were coming in, and 58% of undecided voters who watched the debate said they found Karoline's arguments more convincing. "You did it," Mike said, showing her the numbers. "You went toe-to-toe with one of their best and came out ahead." Karoline nodded, but her mind was already moving forward. This is just one moment. We need to capitalize on it immediately. Within hours, the campaign had launched a new ad series titled The Facts Speak that highlighted key moments from the debate. By morning, clips of Karoline's most effective points had been viewed millions of times across social media platforms. More importantly, the campaign's internal tracking showed movement among a crucial demographic, middle-class suburban voters who had been hesitant to support the Republican candidate despite concerns about the economy. 3 days after the debate, Karoline visited a community center in suburban Philadelphia where the campaign had organized a focus group of undecided voters. Rather than speaking to them, she simply listened as they discussed their economic concerns and reactions to the debate. "I've never voted Republican," said one woman in her 40s, "but when she showed those charts about housing costs, that hit home. My kids can't afford to live anywhere near us despite having good jobs." "I just want someone who tells it straight," added an older man. "No fancy words or promises they can't keep. Show me the plan and the numbers behind it." As Karoline listened from behind the one-way glass, she felt a profound sense of responsibility. These weren't just voters or data points, they were Americans trying to make the best choices for their families. Later that evening, she called the candidate to brief him on what she had heard. "They're responding to honesty and clarity," she told him. "They're tired of political spin. They want to know how our policies will actually improve their daily lives." "Then that's exactly what we'll give them," he replied. "I'm expanding your role again. I want you to oversee our closing message for the final 3 weeks." As Karoline hung up the phone, she received another text from Newsom. "The polls are shifting. You've changed the race, but this isn't over yet. GN. She smiled at his persistence. He was right. The election remained close, and many voters were still making up their minds. The debate had been a victory, but the final battle for America's economic future was still ahead. With renewed determination, Karoline opened her laptop and began drafting the campaign's closing argument to the American people. The momentum was with them now, and she intended to maintain it all the way to Election Day. The final 2 weeks of the campaign unfolded at a relentless pace. Karoline had barely slept, moving between swing states as she led the campaign's closing message to voters. The strategy she had crafted had evolved from a targeted response to Governor Newsom into a comprehensive vision for America's economic future that was resonating across demographic groups. "We've got new numbers," Mike announced during their morning strategy call. He was traveling with the candidate in Pennsylvania, while Karoline was in Nevada. "We're up by 4 points nationally and leading in 6 of 7 battleground states." Karoline studied the polling breakdown on her tablet. "The shift among suburban women is remarkable. We've gained 12 points with that group since the debate." Lisa, who was coordinating their media strategy, chimed in from campaign headquarters. "Every network wants you today. Your contrast with Newsom has become the central story of this election." "What's the governor doing?" Karoline asked. Despite their political differences, she had developed a grudging respect for Newsom's persistence and skill. "He's in Wisconsin today," Lisa replied. "They're making one last push to shore up the blue wall states. His message has shifted, though. He's talking less about California's model and more about federal programs and protections." Karoline nodded. "He's adapting. Smart move." She understood why Newsom had pivoted. Their campaign had effectively turned California's economic policies into a liability rather than an asset. "The candidate wants to know where you think we should focus these final days," Mike said. Karoline didn't hesitate. "Michigan. It's still the closest of the battlegrounds, and historically, it's been the tipping point. If we win Michigan, we win the election." That afternoon, Karoline flew to Detroit for what would be the campaign's largest rally yet. As her plane descended, she could see the venue from the air, a massive crowd already gathering in the downtown, park hours before the event was scheduled to begin. Her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. She knew who it was before reading it. "Saw you're heading to Michigan, so am I. May the best message win. GN." So Newsom was coming to Michigan too. This final showdown in the crucial swing state seemed fitting after their weeks of long-distance messaging battles. The rally that evening exceeded all expectations. More than 25,000 people filled the park, many holding signs with phrases from Karoline's debate performance, "Results, not rhetoric," and "The facts speak." When she took the stage to introduce the candidate, the crowd erupted. This young woman, who had been virtually unknown just months ago, was now a political force in her own right. "Thank you, Michigan," she began, her voice confident and clear in the cool evening air. "Throughout this campaign, we've had a simple approach: tell the truth, show the facts, and trust Americans to make the right choice." She continued, outlining the key components of their economic vision: reducing barriers for small businesses, addressing the housing crisis through smarter regulations, and creating an environment where innovation could flourish in all industries, not just technology. "Some say these ideas are too simple or too traditional," she said, implicitly referencing Newsom's criticisms. "But the most powerful solutions often are simple. When something isn't working, you don't make it more complicated. You fix the fundamentals." As she introduced the candidate, Karoline felt a moment of genuine pride, not just in her own rise or the campaign's success, but in the substantive nature of the conversation they had sparked across America. In a political era often dominated by personality and division, they had managed to create a debate about ideas and outcomes. The next morning, Karoline visited a diner in suburban Detroit that had become a favorite stop for political campaigns. Rather than making a speech, she simply sat at the counter, ordered coffee, and listened to the conversations around her. "I wasn't planning to vote at all," an older man told his friend at a nearby table. "Didn't think it mattered. But that debate changed my mind." First time I've heard someone talk about why my grandkids can't afford houses like straight-up facts, not just blaming the other side. A young waitress refilling Karoline's coffee recognized her. My roommates all watched you on that debate. We're all voting for the first time. You made it feel like it actually matters. These conversations reinforced what Karoline had believed. From the beginning, Americans were hungry for authenticity and clarity. They didn't need to be talked down to or entertained. They simply wanted leaders who understood their challenges and communicated honestly about solutions. That evening, news broke that Governor Newsom had landed in Michigan and would be holding a major event the next day in the same city. The final battle for the crucial swing state was set. Karoline received a surprising request from her team. Newsom had proposed they appear together on a local morning show for a final joint interview before Election Day. After consulting with the candidate, she agreed. The next morning, Karoline arrived at the television studio to find Newsom already there, reviewing notes with his staff. When he saw her, he walked over and extended his hand. "Regardless of what happens Tuesday, you've run a hell of a campaign," he said with what seemed like genuine respect. "You've changed the conversation." "Thank you, Governor," she replied, shaking his hand. "You made us bring our best every day." Their joint interview was remarkably civil, focusing on their different visions for America's future rather than personal attacks. As they finished, the host asked them each for a final message to undecided voters. Newsom went first, emphasizing his experience and the importance of progressive policies to protect vulnerable Americans. His answer was polished and heartfelt. When Karoline's turn came, she spoke directly to the camera. "If you're still deciding, I would simply ask you to look at results, not rhetoric. Look at which policies have actually delivered for American families, and which ones have made life more difficult despite good intentions. The choice is yours, and we trust your judgment." On Election Day, Karoline began her morning as she had throughout the campaign, reviewing data and coordinating their final get-out-the-vote efforts. The polling showed a tight race nationally, with their candidate maintaining narrow leads in key states. As early returns began coming in that evening, the campaign war room was tense but optimistic. They had built a strong operation and delivered a clear message. Now it was in the hands of the American people. At 11:17 p.m., the first major network called Michigan for their candidate. The room erupted in cheers. It wasn't the final call for the election, but everyone knew its significance. Michigan had been the tipping point state in their projections. If the call held, they would likely win the presidency. Karoline's phone buzzed one last time with a message from Newsom. "Looks like your message won the day. Congratulations on a race well run. The country will be watching." By midnight, it was becoming clear that their candidate would indeed prevail. What had begun as a targeted response to one Democratic surrogate had evolved into a winning national strategy. Karoline Leavitt, in just a few short months, had delivered what many considered impossible, a clear victory in an era of divided politics. As the candidate delivered his victory speech in the early hours of the morning, he called Karoline to the stage. "This campaign succeeded because we spoke directly and honestly to the American people," he told the cheering crowd. No one embodied that approach better than Karoline Leavitt. Standing beside him, looking out at the sea of supporters, Karoline felt a profound sense of purpose. The real work was just beginning. Now they would have the chance to turn their campaign promises into policies that would actually improve American lives. The path ahead would be challenging, but she was ready. In a political world often dominated by personality and division, she had helped prove that substance and honesty could still prevail.